KLTV sound check. 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 KLTV soundcheck, KLTV soundcheck. KLTV soundcheck, KLTV soundcheck. KLTV soundcheck, KLTV soundcheck. KLTV soundcheck, KLTV soundcheck. KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check.
So seeing as the Board of Health is such an enjoyable meeting, and it's your job is to take 2 hours under consent agenda.
Uh, well, I will let you explain bathymetric survey.
Mathematic survey.
Yeah. You came a lot closer to studying that in oceanography than I did, right?
Yeah, I can add stuff in there that would be somewhat entertaining.
Yeah.
KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check, KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check, KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check, KLTV sound check.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday morning public meeting. If you want to join me, I'll rise for the flag salute. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll ask Commissioner Mortensen if he wants to, for his review on the minutes.
I did, as usual, review the minutes of the activities, and I move to approve those minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Any questions, corrections?
I have none.
See none from the audience. I see no hands. Call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Consent agenda. Since I was absent yesterday, I'm going to ask Commissioner Weber to run through the consent agenda. He was here and listened during our prep, so.
Well, between Mr. Mortensen and myself, we should be able to cover most of the information that we had at our meeting yesterday. The first item on the consent agenda is a call for a hearing. You'll recall that we periodically have budget amendments throughout the year to keep things up to date. We oftentimes get notified that we receive grants and those have to be added to the budget if we hadn't anticipated that for a year. And other projects that departments report to us need budget amendments. So we'll be having a hearing on the 19th of March, considering an amendment both to finish up last year. The final bills come in January and February, so we can square that out. And then the budget amendment for the current budget year. This item number 2 has actually been withdrawn. It was submitted by our Director of Corrections, and she's gonna bring it back to us with some additional work on that. Item number 3 is an interlocal agreement with Mason County to take care of their solid municipal waste. We have been contracting with counties in the Puget Sound area, and we've considered a contract and agreement with Mason County. They've asked for a slight adjustment that renewals would be at 5-year intervals after the first period of time. So that's the only change for that interlocal agreement. Number 4 and number 5 are related. These are requests from the coroner's office. Larger counties typically have to hire pathologists to do their autopsies. More deaths, it's cheaper for them to hire a pathologist on staff. We're not that big. The number of autopsies can be handled without the additional expense of added benefits. We just have a flat rate, $120,000. And the First Amendment, number 4, adjusts that to set it at 60 autopsies a year. And that was an increase. I think it had been estimated at 48,000. But the amount hasn't changed. Well, the amount has just changed a little bit to adjust for cost of living. And item number 5 is for a substitute in case Dr. Nelson isn't available or has exceeded the amount for his contract. Dr. Lysina comes in, and the other interesting thing is they set us. This is setting a rate for child autopsies, as always a tragic situation when the infants have unusual or suspicious deaths and an autopsy has to be made. Although interestingly, the autopsies for children are handled by a grant from the state, reimbursement from the state. Still comes from the taxpayers, but rather than our general fund. So those just adjust to the 60 autopsies a year as the limit. On the next page, item number 6 is a resolution appointing Lillian Hale to be the temporary successor to 19th Legislative District State Representative Joel McIntyre. As you may know, he is in the Marine Corps Reserves, and he's been called to duty right as the session is coming to an end. And he has requested that the counties in his district appoint Lillian Hale, who is his stepdaughter, to serve in his place. The interesting little quirk is she does not turn 18 until March 7th, and the session ends on March 8th. So it's just a one-day situation. You have to be a registered voter to serve in the legislature. So one day when they finish up, reconciling all the differences, he's assured us that she's going to vote the right way. So it has been interesting because all counties that his district is part of, all the commissioners have to agree on the appointment. So we've done it, and we sent a letter to Lewis County and Wahkiakum County and Grace Harbor County, sharing that these appointments have all been agreed to. Item D is a letter from Bill Fashing, the Executive Director of the Council of Government. Council of Government has an important responsibility to approve transportation grants that come our way in a number of different categories. And we have been notified we've received funds for a grant for some improvements on Coal Creek Road. Fully anticipated, we'd applied for it, so this just is a confirmation. We'll be able to spend those dollars. Item F is from the FERC, our favorite Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They are constantly monitoring the dams on the Lewis River, making sure that the dams are safe and operated in an appropriate manner. This notice refers to SWIFT number 2, which is operated by the Cowlitz County PUD, and telling us that the surveys that they've asked for have been are done and in order. And the last 2 items under correspondence represent appointments to our mosquito control district. That's an agency that collects money from assessments to go after mosquitoes that, if left to their own devices, get out of control and cause a lot of discomfort. So we have this little agency, 5 people are appointed, and 2 of them had terms that expired, so we had to refill their appointments. Last item are the vouchers from Drainage Improvement District number 1 and a variety of different claims that have come through from the various offices. The process is no claim can be paid unless the rules and policies have been met by the various departments, and the auditor ensures that that has been the case. So the vouchers today total just shy of $3 million. Are there any other questions?
You want me to chime in?
Sure.
Just for clarity, pathologists are very hard to find. In fact, we are one of the very few, we are one of the very, very few counties that actually has a full-time pathologist that we pay for. That's item number 4. That's Dr. Nelson. That is actually a statement that says every month we're going to be paying $10,000. And Dr. Nelson is obligated to do as many as 60 autopsies in that year. We do more than 60 autopsies a year, and for that overflow, that's what the amendment number 5 is with Dr. Laxina. That amendment, Dr. Laxina is paid on a per event, while Dr. Nelson is paid in a retainer, essentially. And yeah, one comment about appointing Lillian Hale is that the session is supposed to end March 8th or 9th, but if there is a call for a continuation, I forget what's the proper term?
Special session.
Special session, we may have to do this again. So if you may see it again, it's nothing unusual there. And Dennis actually chided me a little bit in a nice friendly way about bathymetry. That's item, which item was that?
F,
Item F. Dams, you'd think you just build them and there's no maintenance. And obviously we know that our sediment retention dam has problems because it builds sediment. Same thing happens with dams. So bathymetry is just how much stuff is accumulating behind the dam wall, and should something be done about that based on the results. And I can't help myself for quite, so in oceanography, you do bathymetry, and there are lots of ships that go across the ocean, and many of them are volunteers, and they take an instrument called an XBT, expendable thermograph, which is a little torpedo about this long that you drop overboard as a ship is passing by. And that torpedo is connected by a thin filament of copper. And that information is taken into the ship. And then at the end of the cruise, it's downloaded to the World Oceanographic community to see it. And what it records is temperature and as a function of depth, a very useful concept in oceanography. I could tell you some interesting anecdotes, but I think that's probably for this afternoon after we go to Dennis's house for a barbecue and beer, right?
all right, there you go.
Wow.
You know, you talked about the sediment behind the dams. It was interesting. I had a brief conversation with somebody, and I don't recall all the details of even what state they were from, but they were having some issues with sediment buildup behind the dam to the point that was affecting capacity and flood control. So they were trying to figure out what to do with some of that. I don't know that we have it as bad here, but they were having a real issue with that.
Colvin Creek is a little creek that flows north to the Lewis River through Clark County. And there's a dam, a pretty tall dam that was originally designed to provide water for a hatchery that's right down at the Lewis River below the dam. But that dam has completely filled up with sediment. I mean, it's a marsh right behind the top of the dam. And normally, you know, the usefulness of the dam is over with, so we should take it out and restore the fish passage. But the fish hatchery is down below, so they can't remove the dam. And it's that's the only one that I've seen
In our area?
that's completely filled up.
Yeah.
It did not produce electricity, so it just provided water for this dam. They get it from another source now. Kind of a weird deal. There was a dam that was removed on Forest Service land on I think it was the White Salmon River, and about 10 years ago, and it restored fish passage. The dam had been built 100 years ago, 110 years ago, and so no salmon had been able to spawn in that creek. Within the first year, salmon had found their way back to the former spawning grounds, but the sediment has made its way down to the Columbia River. And you notice that if you're driving down Highway 84, particularly because it's this big delta out in front of the mouth of that river, except it's not there anymore. It has steadily moved. It's now down at Government Island, which is the island you cross over on the freeway to go to PDX. And I imagine it'll make its way down to the Kalama and the mouth of the Cowlitz. And once it gets past the Portland area, the Corps' job is to make sure it doesn't clog up transportation. So it's interesting, those things make their way down. Just like on the Cowlitz River, the sediment from the road washouts finally making its way down to Longview and Kelso. So sediment is important.
Mother Nature has its way of doing things and we can only intercede to a certain extent.
True.
And it takes a lot of energy to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I don't get this opportunity very often, so I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Any questions? Any questions?
I'll let you call, you read it, I'll let you call the vote.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, we have one motion item today. Cowlitz County Comprehensive Parks Habitat and Recreation Plan. While they're getting up in the setting, we do have Board of Health at 10 today. I'll try and be respectful of that, but just so you're aware.
Good morning, Commissioners, members of the public. Savannah Clement, Cowlitz County Public Works Services Department. And I'm here with Alyssa Dunn, who's our Parks Operations Specialist. And we have in front of the board the Parks Comprehensive Plan. This has been workshopped several times over the last 6 months or so. It was out for public comment back in August. And so now we have that plan in front of you to hopefully approve. And then if there's any questions or comments from the public, address those as well. Essentially, the plan is a high-level overview of all of our capital improvement projects. We do this every 6 years. We also will do amendments here and there if we've added more projects or funding sources become available. And so that's pretty much the gist of the plan itself. Some big project updates that we've added include a pump track at Riverside Park that we would like to move forward with, and then also a legacy park play system, which we're hoping to secure additional ARPA funding for, excuse me. And then we also have all of our projects included that we've completed over the last few years. So there's a lot in this plan, and it's pretty exciting to see what our parks will start looking like moving forward with all these projects going into fruition. So I have Alyssa here as well. Alyssa, did you want to add anything else?
Just that this plan is important because it goes to the state RCO so we can apply for grants. That way we can have matching funds to do these projects.
So about 10 years ago, the state of Washington passed a huge bond issue to make money available for park development of all kinds, from ATV parks to static picnic parks and so on. But we have to make application to it, and the competition is pretty stiff. We have made a number of grants, been successful with a number of grants from that state agency, sometimes referred to as RCO,
Yep.
Recreation and Conservation Office. And they have millions of dollars every year to spend throughout the state. Alyssa, I wonder, just for the benefit of the citizens here, remind us just a few of those RCO grants and what they've gone for already.
So the last one we got was they call it a YAF. So it's youth athletic facilities for Riverside Park. We revamped the soccer fields. Basically, we stripped the sod off the top and regrew it, and it's nice and flat. And the holes that kids were tripping in are no longer there. And with that money, we also renovated 2 of the bathrooms that service those soccer fields. We put in a new fence around the soccer fields to keep the ball inside instead of on the road. Some of the other projects have also been for the public shooting range. We've gotten 2 for up there to expand the trap range and to actually just build the whole facility. Another project is we're building another bathroom up there at the shooting range for the trap range itself. And then we've gotten grants. Actually, Riverside, when it was first built, was from one of these grants back in the 70s. Willow Grove was another one. So a lot of park agencies in the state, they go through RCO to get extra money.
So in our discussion yesterday, we talked about kind of an emerging issue. Adjacent to the shooting range is some unused, unregulated sandy area from what we call LT1, which is leftover sediment from Mount St. Helens. And folks have discovered that's a great place for off-road vehicle racing and tearing around. It's actually a pretty nice, relatively soft soil. And it's been, it is kind of interesting when the county first agreed to go forward with the shooting range at the request of the Cowlitz and Fish and Game folks. The neighbors were concerned about the noise from the range. And that project was reviewed by a hearings examiner who made some requirements on how to muffle the sound. We no longer get complaints from the neighbors for noise from the shooting range because it's done very well. But they complain about the noise from the off-road vehicles. But that's also in a sensitive area as the sediment continues to slough off into the Toutle River. And one of our long-range plans is to try to stabilize that bank, which would necessitate using that space that's currently recreation. It's not designated officially. It's kind of an informal park, but that has created an interest group that not only wants to help police themselves and pick up trash and, avoid damage and things like that, but we recognize that's an interest that the citizens have. If we change the use to that shoreline restoration and a tree farm, we'll probably need to look for another location. And that new location would be an ideal location or would be well qualified for one of these RCO grants because has to be on the plan. The deadline for the grants is
May 1st.
May 1st.
We have to have our plan done in
And
March.
they have to get a copy of our updated plan March 1st, right?
Yep.
So it's timely that we go forward.
And in context of what you were mentioning, LT1 and Cook Ferry are also on this list for the very reasons you mentioned. Yep.
Thank you. Are there some other undeveloped areas that may possibly at some time in the future?
Just an update on what we've done. Kellyman Park is one, undeveloped park area. Recently, we went in and put in parking area. We're looking at bathroom structures for that location. And we're also looking at trail partnerships moving forward in other areas that we don't have currently parks established, but may have park land available. So that we have a lot of on the list. Did you want to talk about anything that you've been looking at?
Yeah, future grant opportunities, is that what we're talking about? So new parks, is that the question?
I know there has been a little bit of interest in developing a fishing area called Hog Island or Hog Island?
Hog
Island.
Hog Island.
Yeah.
Out by
So
where
that's
I
a-
live.
Yeah,
that's
way
a-
up,
that's
way
a
up north.
potential.
We actually went to a site visit there, a week or two ago. We went up there to take a look at the space, look at parking
Put a
opportunities.
sign up.
We put a sign up. So yes, we've actually been out there very recently to look at the opportunities with that property. Just long-term kind of planning and ideas. We're also looking at maybe park opportunities more South County because we don't have a lot of parks South County in Cowlitz County that are represented by our group. Maybe the Kalama Woodland area. So we have been looking, into the future at potential opportunities South County as well. But Hog Island's probably our most northernest.
There's
point.
been a couple people that just come up and clean up and do stuff around
Mhm.
there. and
Yeah,
work on it.
unfortunately, we do have some trash dumping issues at Hog Island, unfortunately. So we're trying to make sure that we're, cleaning that area up so it's more visible from the road. So to try to deter some of that dumping and so.
Yeah, and this plan is more for developing the parks that we already have, and we do leave parts of it open-ended in case we do want to do acquisition in the future. But we don't list specific properties that we would like to acquire, just that we're open to it. And as long as there's something in there about that, we can still go for grants for acquisition.
Yeah, it's acquire additional park space in South County is listed. It's just very, again, vague, open-ended.
Although the fact of the matter is, the biggest park system in the county is on the Lewis River. It's just owned by Pacificor. All of them are owned by Pacificor.
Right.
It's a major park program. You mentioned Kellyman Park.
Mhm.
That's not even been there's not been a grand opening yet, soft opening, right?
Nope.
No, not yet.
Yeah. So, and that is up Rose Valley Road.
Yeah, it's almost out towards the end of it.
It's
the
about
cor-
11 miles or so. Is
I
that?
couldn't tell you how many miles, but it's about where it ends and it becomes a one-lane road. So it's at the end. And over the last year, we've added, like Savannah said, we added a parking lot, and then we have a bathroom that has been ordered and it should arrive and be in by the end of May. And it's a great little park. You can access the river. Kids can go swimming
Or fishing?
or, yeah, I haven't seen very much fishing.
Or kayaking, maybe? It's off the Kellyman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great potential.
Mhm.
It used to be a road right away. I
Yeah.
mean, it is a road, former road right away. That
Correct. And the roads donated it to the park system. Correct.
So, one of the things I wanted to be sure that it's clear and we're on the same page is, Mr. Chairman, yesterday in your absence, we essentially, well, I was going to ask Parks and Recreation to tell us what they thought their marching orders were with respect to LT1, AKA off-road vehicle stuff. And I expressed that I thought the board was committed to providing something like that, and that part of their charter is figure it out. And there's a lot of land at LT1 that, so I wouldn't blanket just say we've got to go elsewhere. There are a lot, because that's extant, it's always easier to stay there than it is to break in a whole new area for a variety of reasons. But bank stabilization is important because it's only a matter of time before that area continues to shrink. And it doesn't mean that, so anyhow, just for the purpose of, I assume we're all three on that same page with that.
I would be, yeah.
Then a question for you is, do you have an update on the rest stop in Ariel that?
I don't have any updates on the Cougar rest stop. As far as my understanding is it's still in legal review once we returned it back to Pacificor and their team.
Okay,
So
so
you mentioned Ariel. Did you mean Cougar?
Yeah.
I meant Cougar, but
Yep, sorry. Cougar rest area. Yes.
Ariel is easier to say than than
And the
Cougar.
place, yeah. It is a rest area that the Port of Woodland had been providing maintenance for.
Correct.
For some reason, Pacific Corp doesn't want to add that to their park system.
Yeah.
So again, the reason for bringing this up, both is we have public out there that is really interested, and this is one way we can communicate our intent. I'm very careful. It's very difficult to promise anything other than one's intent.
Right. And our intent and our direction from the board is that we're ready to go up and start maintaining janitorial functions at that rest stop. Unfortunately, we're just kind of, that has to be memorialized in an interlocal agreement. So that's currently, we're just kind of waiting for that to get approved.
How many iterations of an agreement have there been?
This is probably, so the first one was, gosh, 25 pages, went down to 10. We responded with like 3. So we're on our third.
Would you all join me in laughing and how we can, it's just, may we maintain this rest area?
Yeah.
Well, we need a 25-page contract in order to do that.
We have, our intention is to do that. We
Mhm.
just want to make sure it's a fair exchange.
Correct. And it's not it's not on the border, on Public Works. We're currently kind of just waiting for a response.
This plan, would it be fairly correct? On the road deal, we submit projects on a yearly basis, just in case we get to them. So they're on the radar and they're available for funding. That's the same type of thing we do with this plan.
Correct. That would be our 6-year plan. This is our 6-year Parks Comprehensive Plan. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you need any action on this one, do you?
We have to adopt it.
Yeah, it's a
Oh.
motion item.
adopt the updated, okay. Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the updated Cowlitz County Comprehensive Parks Habitat and Recreation Plan.
We have a motion on, comments, stuff?
I just have one comment.
Sure.
if you don't
At
mind.
the,
Absolutely.
Um, It's green, I think. Okay, there is one part that I'm very interested in. I take my horse there occasionally, and it has been ruined. Okay, I can't remember the name of it. You can access it though. It's on the east side of the east side of Cowlitz, the west side of the Cowlitz River. And you can access it through Camelot.
That's Cook Ferry Trails.
Cook Ferry.
Carrie.
And they have devastated it with these huge humongous holes. Okay. And then I'm sorry, there's been vandalism all along. And many people go there with their four-wheelers. They had a nice trail that was totally ruined. You had, I want to know about how can we stop the vandalism? And can we, if they're not going to dredge the
Yeah.
river, can we repair?
green light's not on.
It's not.
Oh, now it's really green. Okay. Can we have the holes repaired and make that the park that it was?
Are we talking the sand that they took out, the big holes?
The huge holes, the ones that are bigger than this room and very
From
deep.
the
They're
the sand
at the
mining.
parking lot
Okay.
by the Cook Ferry or down farther, excuse me. It's called Chinook Park or something like that.
The parking lot
Correct. And there's gigantic holes.
where they took the sand.
So it shouldn't have been.
Isn't that where the sand that was stored there from the dredge spoils
Yes.
has been sold?
Correct.
So that's kind of like, it's a sort of a mine that we sell that as an asset.
Correct. So just a quick history. So those are Mount St. Helens dredge spoils. For those who don't know, Cooks Ferry and LT1 are two of our locations that we put those dredge spoils. A few years ago, we started working on contract to allow people to utilize that sand for construction ash. And so they've started to do so at Cooks Ferry. And so the big holes that you're seeing is where they have dug out the ash, the sand, and they actually pay the park system money to do so. So that should not be occurring on any of the trail systems, though. That should not be on the active park locations that people utilize. But what you're saying is it is.
Well, if you have a horse, it's very discerning to that poor animal.
To see
they-
that, okay.
You know, and
Okay.
it kind of freaks them out, actually.
I see.
But if you're not going to use them, you know, maybe they can be smoothed over.
Sure, no, I
Instead of
understand.
just left there, because
Mhm.
that's one of the problems. But is there any way to patrol or take care of? I mean, we really enjoyed having the tables there and the garbage cans there. And, you know, it was someplace for people actually to they even camped. And now most of that's destroyed. Is there any way to patrol that area? Because you know, there are a lot of people go down and fish
Mhm.
on that side of the river. And I'd like to have it improved and make it a much better park for these people. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we could always improve the park. It's vandalism. I can't stop it, sadly. And it happens at all of our parks. I mean, especially Cook Ferry, I hate to say it. We put in something nice like a table and it's gone within a week. People just take it even though it's concreted in. It's
know,
amazing.
I know.
People steal garbage cans out there. So we're constantly picking up trash sites out there and garbage, and we try to keep them up the best we can. But if you see anything and it's been there for a little while, if you could just call our office and let us know where it's at, we will get to it as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I saw some horses down on the bank from Lions Park the other day. That wasn't you, was it? Yeah.
So Lions Park is Castle Rock Park on the other side of the
Off
lake
of Huntington right there.
from,
Yeah,
from Cooks Ferry.
yeah.
Cooks Ferry is one of those locations. We've not really done anything. It's not, there had been a whole series of fishing shacks that have been built over the years. I think last I heard, they were pretty well taken down, or are some of them still there?
There's still some up, and it has a established trail system.
Yep.
And then that's about it. And then there's the bathroom that's there. It's utilized for horses and for fishing for the most part.
I know-
S-
Go ahead.
So, Alyssa, your staff would obviously be the ones in charge of doing the maintenance at all the different parks, from Harry Gardner to the shooting range. And then every time we add a location, that's additional stop. And we're talking about going all the way out to Cougar.
Yeah.
We're talking about this huge staff of employees, right?
Two.
Two, yeah, yeah.
We've got
And
a
that's one of
staff
the
of-
challenges that we have. We haven't spent the resources to develop a parks. In fact, since I've been on board, we've actually given away 2 parks.
That's
We
correct.
used to operate the park at County Line
Mhm.
and Willow Grove.
Mhm.
And because of expenses, the last recession, we spun those off. They're still open and they're operated by port agencies, but that's, parks is one of those areas that gets hit whenever there's a recession.
Mhm.
Um, But it's not surprising as we hear more people wanting to do recreation in all the different kind of locations. Pressure may be on for augmenting that staff, but
Right.
that may be for another Board of Commissioners to resolve.
So specifically, I'm interested in the process and closing the loop. It's too often that we don't have closure on a request or something like that. So we just heard essentially a request.
Mhm.
What's going to happen from here and how do you get back to the person that made the request?
Oh, good point. So normally what we would do with any request from the board, or a citizen in a public meeting, we would likely follow up in a public meeting, whether that be a workshop, which we meet Wednesday afternoons, or, in some cases, if it's not more of a public response, it's a phone call. So phone call back to the member of the public. So what I like to do is if I have a public request, I usually will wait, talk to the person after the meeting, give a business card, follow up in that way so that they have some closure.
So in this case, I would think you would want from the board a sentiment of appetite for supporting that or not. And then you would say, okay, I've got to work that into my overall plan with 2 underutilized employees doing a lot of work. That was sarcasm, of course. And so, and typically nothing will get done unless you say, okay, I will get something done, announced, decided in a month, let's say, where you then say, okay, we have an idea, we're going to go there, and you talk with, pardon the use of the word, stakeholder.
Mhm.
Am I doing all right in this
Yeah,
case?
yeah. I mean, to me, it's just really honestly good customer service, good public service, right? We don't have necessarily a policy or practice in how we respond, just that we make sure that we follow up and we respond appropriately in a short period of time.
Yeah, I'm assuming sort of all that. Now I'm really looking for a specific answer to that question.
How am I going to improve Cookberry?
That you're going to look into the issue and come up with a conclusion and issue a timeline that based on what you know now. So for example, you might say in my plan, the plan that we're about to adopt, that horse park isn't in there, or is it?
It is for future growth, but it's not specifically for a horse. park.
Right.
Correct. Yes, it's in there.
And at some point, you'd want to put something in there, perhaps. And, but in any event, if I were the citizen who came up and asked, I want to know. And there's no, it's one of those things where you can provide some feedback. You don't provide a solution because it
Right.
might be 6 years from now, or it might be 3 months.
Right.
Unlikely, but.
The good thing about parks too is there's some tangible results we can provide, right? I mean, you can see it if we're ensuring that we're going to improve something or follow up on something. And hopefully that's another piece that's provided to stakeholders. When they bring us a complaint or a concern or a follow-up item, they can see us responding. So that's nice.
And in this case, you might enlist from the citizen, or ask the citizen to go out and try and get for you an honest assessment of what the interest is.
So generally speaking, when I receive requests and complaints, I usually work with them over the phone or I'll meet them at the park and we'll go through what changes they would like to see. And if we can do it, we will do it. And I usually give them a timeline as to when we'll get it done,
Good, okay, and that's in play here.
when they call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you expecting a phone call from her? Or are you going to be responding to her
Yeah,
since she came to us here?
I'll meet with you.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll get your info.
bingo. That's
Probably just a couple comments from historical perspective on things I've worked on. These type of things really take volunteer involvement because you don't want us to spend for the staff and the enforcement to protect everything out there. It would be a never-ending siphon. So the places I've seen that have worked well, like Backcountry Horsemen, I think they take on the Willpaw Hills, they take on different areas and they make sure it stays up and deal. Northwest Motorcycle Association that I used to be president of for a decade will take on areas like LT1 and make sure it stays picked up and clean and all that kind of stuff. You can't do it all yourself. The user groups have to also step up and help with these things. So that would be my comment on that. We can't send you enough money to take care of all of it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed that yesterday, Commissioner Dahl. You weren't here, but we absolutely agree. And our most successful park areas are managed and assist with community groups, volunteer groups, Friends of Harry Gardner Park. Commissioner Weber mentioned Cowlitz Game and Anglers at the gun range. So absolutely our most successful areas that are the best policed have volunteer groups.
There's
helping.
a motorcycle group in Shelton, Puget Sound Enduro Riders has been taking care of that for us for better than 20 years. They keep it cleaned up and stuff like that at no expense to the landowner, which is a great benefit for both. So I know it can be done.
Yeah, I think we can only underestimate the importance of a user group deciding something here for a small user group, and we have no sense of how to prioritize everything. If it's free, the demand is infinite. Well, in this case, it's not free. A user group has to be involved, the motorcycle club, and so forth, and that lets us know the
Yeah.
level of importance, and it gets the job done.
The Forest Service, I've gone up and done trail repair of Gifford Pinchot, rebuilt a bridge with a group and stuff. So, I mean, they rely on those type of people a lot, so. And I know you know that, I'm just saying it.
Yeah, we're proud of our parks. We know that it can define a community. When people are moving to an area, it's, well, how are the schools? Are there any parks? It's part of, who we are, and it does, it's the tangible things that people see. So we're proud of what we do, but we definitely could always use the help and support of the community.
Any other questions?
So
ahead.
the importance of volunteer groups can't be understated, as we've mentioned. But in my experience, we always have to keep in mind that volunteer groups kind of have a life of their own. Usually there are a handful of people who are the real advocates, and everything works really well when there's a handful of people that are committed. And Father Time has his way of dealing with people, and they go away. And there's the story that I like to tell has to do with City of Longview. I apologize for bringing up Longview, but there was a very active Longview Rose Club that needed a location, and they found a lawn next to the public library, and they put together this wonderful rose garden. Roses are high maintenance, and they are scrambling because those original volunteer group, they're not even alive anymore. And it falls on the shoulder of the city to try to keep that going, because how dare you take away a rose garden? And that's one of those challenges. We have a little bit of the same kind of a challenge with the shooting range. We've been told that the game and anglers may not have the capacity to continue providing the service out there.
That's correct.
We have a contract with them that expires, I think at the end of 25, is that right?
Yes.
they've certainly sent us plenty of signals that they may not be even able to renew it, which means what happens then? Do we shut it down? I don't think so. So volunteer groups are really important in establishing a public desire and need. But over the long term, we always have to keep in the back of the mind, there may be some additional costs to keep the program going once that's established. I wish it weren't that way, but it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Good point.
Ron?
I don't know any of the details about this park that we were just discussing, but I heard the word borrow pit. And when I hear borrow pit, then I know that contractors or someone are in there, they have equipment that's there, et cetera. And so part of our expectation or specification would be that they leave the site in some sort of a condition when they're through borrowing, meaning you don't leave areas that can cave in or whatever. So that becomes part of an expectation that we share with the use of borrow pits and common areas.
All right, a new subject to complain about, nothing on you guys, of course, but, you know, having grown up here, it used to be the park was gosh dang going out on a logging road and do whatever you want. And it was pretty fun. You had a good time out there all the time. Now, the big companies, warehouses, they have locked up all their roads. Can't blame them for doing that in a way. However, that was the park when I was a kid. So when they did that, and I've kind of gone through this progression, right? So it's like, okay, so I want to go out, I want to race around a little bit, I want to shoot my gun. So the natural spot to go was to that Tootle spot. Well, then they built the gun range there, and God bless the gun range. I've gone and shot there, but I mean, you know, it ain't the same fun as, you know, wildly shooting into the air. So then you end up, because they've closed off all the woods, all this extra stress on what we have in parks, you know? And so there is one really nice spot that would make a fantastic park, and it's gonna go sitting empty forever, and that's Barlow Point, which is owned by the port. And Barlow Point used to be a spot where we would go and have a good time. We used to go to Rainier Beach regularly in the evenings when we were kids. You know, we'd go out to Rainier Beach. Well, they finally closed us off. You know, they shut us out of Rainier Beach back in, and then so then it was like, well, let me find a new spot as Barlow Point. Barlow Point, for what the port has there, is or would be just a great place for a park. I don't think it'll ever happen, but the port's going to end up sitting on that land for the next, 100 years or something. Nobody's going to be able to dock out there. It's too far from everything else. It's kind of a foolish purchase on their part, I thought. But that's my point about parks is we've given the tree companies huge tax breaks on their properties, but we can't go on the roads. And we've got to build roads all the way up to those gates. And like in the situation of Cowlitz, now that was another spot I kind of got forced over to. Cowlitz's a great place to go swimming. The water's not too cold there because it comes out of a lake first. But if you go up to where you're talking about, you got to drive that one stretch of road where it's like you're in the driver's seat and you can look over the edge, you know, and you're gonna there's gonna be a lot of traffic going up that road. All of a sudden, you know, you're gonna stress out a road that's not in very good shape already. So, you know, it's kind of a rock and a hard spot. I feel for you guys in a way because the population never used to have to congregate like that. It used to just spread out all over the place. Nobody's going to tell them to take down their gates, but really, for what they get from us, we shouldn't be restricted on being able to go up those roads.
Yeah. No doubt, there's much more stresses on the local parks than there used to be.
One of you made a comment about we get assets and then the group that was involved in it disappears, and then the government is left with something else to take care of. As I look at school boards, I look at cities. Normally, the way they're building their asset base is by getting free government grants. And then at some point, then we have to start maintaining
which was not included in the grant. So the common theme that I see here is we are way too agreeable to taking on new assets, whether it's from a volunteer group or through a grant process, and then not having the ability to maintain it. And all we have to do is look at the gigantic deferred maintenance at every one of the jurisdictions around here. And that to me is a symptom of not being disciplined enough to say no.
I'd like to comment on that. The devil's always in the detail. The gun range itself was a problem from the start, and there's all kind of history there that has caused us a lot of anguish. When I look at the off-road vehicle work, some of the stuff that the chairman has mentioned, that's there, and the only thing we're essentially offering is to codify that into existence as opposed to saying that area is being used by this, but we have a more important use for that. We really ought to be able to judge the extant use against a more important, against a potentially more important use. But we mustn't discount something that's already there. Now the gun range, I would say, is a very bad example. Public buildings, bathrooms, and things like that, it's a totally different issue than allowing freedom in public lands. The only catch is always liability issues, and I don't want to go down that discussion.
I'm a little late to the party, but from what I've gathered, I don't know if this has already been covered, but Dennis, with your story, what I would, when we make mistakes, then we need to go back and say, how could we have prevented that? And so if we do get volunteer things, and there should be some sort of a contract written where everybody's expectations are that it continues to be done, handled or passed on. And if people aren't willing to take it up, then it goes away. Then it is the community's responsibility and fault. If they're not willing to do anything about it, they can't just say to the government, you do it now. They say, well, we're the ones that started it. And if we don't finish it, then it doesn't get done.
Yeah, along those lines, the gun range again is a good example. I don't recall the exact dollar amounts, but I think the county has spent upwards of $300,000 in there. And comparing that to letting off-road vehicles use LT1, it's like, it's a different world.
So any other questions, comments on this updated plan? I don't see any hands. We have a motion on the floor, so I'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a couple minutes. We can open up for public comments for just a couple minutes and then try to get to Board of Health, or if I see none, then I'll take a recess until Board of Health. I will remind you, tomorrow at 2:30, we have Three Rivers wastewater in. That may be interesting. I know they got a new project going on, and I think that's what they're going to talk about. So, seeing none, we'll recess till Board of Health. Okay.
Great. Tim?
Es tiempo.
Okay, welcome to the Board of Health meeting. We'll start this meeting at 10:02. Everybody ready? I think first of all, the minutes have been passed out. Did everybody have time to receive the minutes? Is there any last minute corrections? I'd entertain
I'll
a
move to
motion.
approve the minutes.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes from, what was that? The January meeting minutes of January 30th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Looks like it was unanimous. Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. That was nice and easy. We had a cancellation on the agenda today. We were going to have the school coalitions coming in, but the person who was going to give the presentation is ill, so we're going to put that off and invite them to come back another day. So moving on, we have the next item is the health officer discussion. And we have put out an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. That period has ended. And we have an applicant that applied and wanted to see if anybody had a discussion to discuss this. And then I believe, did we get a resolution, Carol? We have a resolution somewhere? We don't have it printed, but we have a resolution for that. Oh, there she comes. Thank you. Sorry, we jumped right into it too quick. Commissioner Martinson, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, I do in the early goings when we were trying to investigate what it is we should do for a health officer and the concerns we had about the previous arrangement of health officers. There was a fair amount of what I would call exaggeration and misinformation. We were leaned upon, all of us, rather heavily because we thought the world was going to stop because no death certificates would be issued, anything like that. Well, it turns out that that wasn't true. And the death certificates themselves predominantly come through either the coroner or the attending physician. And only when the attending physician refuses to sign a death certificate, which you might want to ask something about that, but in any event, ignoring that, then the health officer may step in and sign a death certificate. So the fact that we, for a few days, did not have a health officer was not the cataclysmic problem that people try to make it out to be. That allowed us the time to think about what it is we wish to do. And certainly the board, the previous Board of Health, which is the BOCC, and some others had some concerns over the previous arrangement we had. And that gave us time to talk with Dr. Krager, and I got to discuss things with Dr. Krager in a very fruitful one-on-one kind of thing that actually is productive. And we're here today ultimately to approve an annual contract to have Dr. Krager be our health officer. we in many other venues or in many other situations in the county find a problem when we only have one single respondent. And that's always something that we have to be concerned about. And we should look for people to be interested in the job. And somehow they're not. And we should find out what that is. Furthermore, in the discussion about the health officer, it's what duties exactly does a health officer do? And we're struggling as a board to try, or at least I am, trying to figure out what the obligations are of HHS versus the health officer. I recall when Dr. Melnick and Dr. Krager first came on board, that they were put under some pressure to decide that Camp Alabama was a health hazard and the health officer was supposed to declare that. And of course, the health officer has a lot of power. So that requires a lot of wisdom and reservation on the part of the health officer, which should be a totally non-political position. And fortunately, I think that's something we can have confidence in with Dr. Krager. The function of the health officer is not the same as HHS. And I think sometimes they're conflated. We think things that are epidemics, well, I would divide them out into a categorization that says, let's say tomorrow there were an incident of Ebola in the county, and maybe the following day after that, there were 3 times as many people succumbing to Ebola or becoming infected. That is the kind of epidemic where I would expect the health officer is going to be right on it and saying, okay, we have to do something about this. But when we misuse the word epidemic for things over which, like epidemic of fat people, present company excluded, of course, we should make a distinction between that where an innocent person is going to be impacted and that where a conscious person does it to themselves somehow. And we don't make that distinction. I think for the things that HHS should do is much more of disseminating information. You cannot mandate people not to have French fries at McDonald's. And that's the distinction I'm trying to drive. So we very much don't mind having a health officer, but we must work with the health officer in appropriate context. The issue on the contracts now, I guess on the resolution, I should look at it. I think I've seen it before. Yeah, in the RFQ, there was an offer of a dollar amount for the contract. I don't know if we want to discuss that or not. I typically am not in favor of discussing remuneration too much because you can be penny wise and pound foolish easily. It is important though for me to put things in perspective, like based on the data I had before, it looks like the health officer gets paid about $190 an hour. And so in the case that there is an epidemic of a Ebola kind, I'm sure $190 is okay. If it's just a sinecure, maybe it's not okay. The board will have to decide what the recommendation is to the BOCC on that. I have a feeling I've skipped over a couple of things, but I'll stop here.
Anybody else on the board have a comment to add, or Gina?
The comment that I wanted to make it twofold is I'm pleased that Dr. Krager is willing to serve as our health officer. The salary and figures are at the discretion of the Board of County Commissioners, not this board. We get to appoint, but paying them is, that's the financial thing that the board will have to work out through our staff, which probably has already been done. I appreciate the resolution that kind of sets out the requirements for being a health officer, and particularly the references to state law that he can only do what the state law allows him to do, but there is an important grant of emergency authority as is needed. So I'm glad to see us at this point where we can call on Dr. Krager. Do we need a motion at this time?
Before that, I do remember, but I'd forgotten, it was one key issue, which is the constructs from the legislature are always going to be a bit bizarre because it's put together by a bunch of people who I won't go down that route at the moment, but if we look at the RCW itself, it states that if our health officer is unavailable, the regional health officer can help us out. So if you look at things, it's a hierarchy. There's the state board of health, and there's a county board of health. Somewhere in parallel around there is I don't know, is there a state health officer? There's certainly a regional health officer. And then there's a county health officer. The purpose of the regional health officer in the RCW, you can infer, is because health officers do go on vacation. Health officers may become temporarily unavailable. So a backup situation has to be in there. When this whole flap took on, the administrative codes actually got a bit perverted, and that all of a sudden, the regional health officer can only perform for us for 2 weeks. And our regional health officer was kind enough to do it for, I think, 3 times that long, for 6 weeks or so. So the picture I'm trying to paint to you is that the goalposts move around depending on what people perceive as an objective. And that's always true, but if it's from an RCW to an administrative code, there can be a lot of noise in there. And we mustn't violate the RCW, but the administrative codes, we should not hesitate to question them. Are they really a reflection of common sense and what should happen? What should happen in this case is fairly clear. We need a health officer that we feel comfortable and understands our needs.
Yeah. You know, I share some of the concerns that you only have one person. You always like a deal, and I just give you a little perspective what I'm always looking for. I think our role is to always look for the person that does the job better than whoever's there. The person in the role, their job is to make sure I can't find that person.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at any of these contracts, is I'm always looking for how do we do it better? Their job is to make sure I can't find a place to do it better. So I think there's really 2 distinct roles. And I think as long as Dr. Krager understands, and I'm sure he does, that I'm always looking for the person that can replace him and do the job better. His job is to make sure I can't find that person. And I look at that in any position we have here at the county and where I was before. So just that little perspective on there.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, there is always a hysteresis in something. So it's not like tomorrow somebody says, oh, there's somebody faster 6-shooter than this guy, and so we will change. No, there's just got to be a slow filtering process where you assess things over a longer period of time and with more meaningful metrics. And we lack a lot of meaningful metrics in a lot of what we're forced into doing. So for this case, how this ties in, I would recommend an annual contract with the confidence that a good job begets another contract, but I also do not I do not assume that, in this case, that the health officer is our prisoner. We have to please the health officer as much as the health officer has to please us. So we're not trying to capture anybody and hold them prisoner.
Well, and I just want to say too that this is a little off the subject, but I appreciate this whole process because I've learned a lot about the health officer, how they function, what happens when there isn't one. And it's really, I think, been a real good education for myself. And it really makes me feel good to have had a chance to get to know Dr. Krager more as a separate entity from the other person involved. And I think that helps us focus more on what he believes and how we can talk to him directly. And I do appreciate that whole process, and I appreciate the public. If you all support it, I appreciate that. But I'm in favor of Dr. Krager.
Gina?
I just wanted to add, I know it is a very unique role to have a health officer. It creates an interesting dynamic. And we work closely at the department with Dr. Krager. We have going through this whole process, and we really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this board and the involvement from everyone as we moved through this. We put together, we have just like an informational page if anyone's interested, just to try to help summarize the role of the health officer and how it interacts with our department. So, local health departments are authorized to do what they do under the authority of a health officer. And so it is much more than like birth and death certificates. It's, responding to solid waste complaints, issuing septic permits, food, restaurant inspections. It's a lot more. All of those pieces happen under the authority of the health officer. So it is a lot more, but we did hear the most about the birth and death certificates because that's our biggest customer service piece. That's where we see the foot traffic in our lobby the most. So that was the piece we were really concerned about. But if anyone's interested,
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to drill into that. That seems a bit odd to me. We operate all under the governor, if you will. The governor hasn't met with us at all. Do we count the governor? My point being is HHS has functions. The health officer is not a legislative entity. The legislature is. So there's some pretty clean roles there. I am surprised, certainly based on the numbers I've heard of the amount of time it takes to be a health officer, that there's even a time that you'd even mention the EHU or something like that. The environmental health unit. Those I see, and this is part of what I was starting to talk about. Those are your job and not the health officers.
right, but it's under the authority of the health officer that sort of gives us that ability to enforce, like when there's solid waste issues, for example. We wouldn't have any authority to do anything about it without that health officer structure. And that's in statute. So there is a lot of those pieces that when you start really drilling in, that a lot of our functions that we do happen under the authority of the health officer. We do them, we carry out the duties, a lot of those, the day-to-day roles, but it happens under that authority.
I think both state law and county policy has language with regard to solid waste that is exactly what you described. Under the authority of the health officer, the department will do such and such and such and such. So
yeah,
that's kind of interesting because you don't normally associate the health officer with garbage, but
it leads to some really interesting things. What happens if the health officer doesn't agree with the regional health officer? So the picture I'm trying to paint to you is that we've got a dummy organization going on. And whenever you have a dummy organization on, it diminishes the human value of an assessment or the the assessment capabilities of a human, because they say, I'm just responding to the boss. And I'm really bothered by this, but there's nothing we can really do about it.
Yeah. I agree. And this has not, I'm okay with this resolution, but what you bring up a point that if anybody has listened to me at any time at all and knows, I really have issue with unelected people being given power to control the public. And so that kind of stuff drives me crazy because they can't reach out and touch them if they don't like it. And I think that's wrong. And a lot of times what that has to do is because politicians elected don't want to make some of these tough decisions. So they pawn it off and say, well, that's what it says. You got to do that. And I disagree with that whole concept, but I'm not talking about this resolution. I'm okay with your resolution.
Sure, appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I think, you know, that it makes, it's really important then for this body to have good relationship with our health officer. And that's why I think we appreciate the thoughtfulness and this process and how, you know, making sure that we're really thinking about how we move forward with our health officer, because we want to make sure that there's good relationship there because of that piece of, you know, this body is the group with several elected officials that get to have say in that. So, yeah.
I'd just like to add too, I'd like to defend the board because what Commissioner Mortensen said is at the beginning, when we were without a health officer for a brief period, there was lots of things going on in the papers and online. In fact, we received some letters to the board that I believe were fake letters of people complaining that they couldn't get certificates. And the truth is that HHS was only about 2 days, I believe, behind.
It was because of the way the system, we had to get back into the system. So it ended up being that whole week we weren't able to process those items.
So 5 days, but which is still far ahead of any other, of most other counties. King County takes a lot longer than that. So there was really, the people were yelling, the sky is falling. And the truth was that it wasn't. It was under control. And I think you guys, I thank you for doing a good job and getting it back on track quickly. And
Also, the public should know that they were never held hostage by this. If there was a copy of a death certificate they required, they could get that from the state.
or just going down to Clark County. So.
Jen, do you have a copy of that, copies of the responsibilities of the health officer that you can share?
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
You need a resolution?
yeah, I'd entertain a motion to accept this resolution. Just for the public clarification, this resolution is going to basically recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to hire Dr. Krager as our health officer, and the terms of his employment and service will be
Thanks, Dina.
determined by the Board of Commissioners.
I would make that
And by
motion.
Dr. Krager.
Sorry?
And by Dr. Krager.
And
Yeah.
Dr. Krager.
Yeah.
Got to agree.
Well, I think we need to be very careful. I don't believe we can set a term. Right? I mean, we can't, it's not a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract.
I think,
What do you
think
do?
you can. The last one was termed,
It
had a
had term.
term.
Last one had a 3-year
It
term
came
on
up
it.
on
Yeah.
December.
So I think it's up to the Board of Commissioners to set that, and I believe that any kind of a public servant should have a term limit.
Check the ordinance. I think the law is a little bit different and unique for that, so. But nevertheless,
Yeah,
there's
I think
also,
there
there's
has to-
also a way we can terminate.
sure. But I don't think they're appointed for life.
There's some curious ramifications there. If we decide not to pay Dr. Krager, after a year, he's forced to stay on the job because he's the appointed health officer. I thought we solved that problem long ago.
Well, with all that said, I'd make a motion to approve this resolution, suggesting to the BOCC that we hire Dr. Krager or work out a contract or schedule, whatever you want to call it, with Dr. Krager.
So a motion on the floor to accept this resolution for Dr. Krager as the health officer. Is there any further discussion? Any hands or anything? Okay,
Not seeing any.
sure. We got a little extra time, so
Thank you for letting me see this. Because I'm part of the public and I really don't know what a health officer, his role is. And so this is a good guideline. But I noticed here, his has powers and duties, okay? Basically, they're very nicely aggressive. No, I shouldn't say nicely. My worry, and of course, everybody, you know, I'm an older lady that has worries. There's nothing here that says he has restrictions on these powers, okay? Which doesn't probably, it sounds rather silly, I agree. However, he is now the regional health officer. Does he supersede if our local health officer says, okay, we have an Ebola outbreak, does the regional say, well, no, you're wrong? Or can he say, no, you're wrong? I will take over, or my word says that, yes, you do. And does he have more power than our local one, for one? And
that's a good question.
Good question.
and then again, if does the regional, of course, he has his powers above him as well. I understand. So basically, and I know this sounds really silly, but I've seen it happen with the mask and the mandates for shots, okay? Where a state official will get this bright idea that we all need to do such and such to be safe, as in the mask, okay? And everybody had to wear it. And the health officer, of course, would be responsible to making sure, you know, that this was happening. He has to follow what the state says then, if I get it right. He has no real control of our county. He can't say, no, I don't agree with the regional or whoever's above him, correct?
If there's a statewide mandate, that does get really hard. What we can do locally is advocate for what's best for our community. That does get really tricky when there's a statewide mandate. Our local health officer then doesn't, you know, his powers and duties don't supersede a statewide.
That's, okay, that was the
mandate.
question.
Yeah.
And then, so let's just say that one day he wakes up and he thinks that we have a real issue with restaurants spreading a disease. Does he have the power to close a great deal of our businesses with that idea? I mean,
Are you
he has to
referring
have-
to the regional or our local?
Our local,
Yeah,
I'm
he
sorry,
does.
our local. I mean, how much power does he have? What if he does close down a string of businesses, whatever it may be? Can we, as a community or as the board, can they protest and say, well, wait a minute, we don't agree with that thought?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a really extreme situation, I would imagine, especially for our local health officer to consider taking a step like that. It hasn't happened for us locally. I don't know, in a very long time, or if I even can think of one since I've been here, but it would be a really, really extreme
Okay.
situation, in which case we would have, you know, communication with the Board of Health about what's going on and what's happening. And
If I could interfere in that, Mr. Chairman, it's a very good question. That answer I've heard before from places like Department of Ecology that says we want to pass a rule that you put meters on wells. And when somebody objects, he says, don't worry about it, because go ahead and pass it, because we don't have the ability to enforce it. It's the same way. There are no constraints, like you mentioned. There are no restraints on this. This is not a good thing.
Yeah.
This is something that the Board of Health should discuss in general. But while I have the microphone, in the Q&A, both Mary Jane and Dennis, the comment is they can't hear you properly.
Oh,
It, what you're pointing out is just not here. This pervasive, we have a building commission in the state of Washington that decides building code for the whole state. We have a Department of Ecology that just issued new septic rules that when they take effect, are probably, when I talk to the septic guys, probably gonna add at least 20 grand to the deal with that. We have a state that wants to control
Yes.
everything, and they have these little,
Yes.
their little commissions and their deal, and this is no different, where they give them all these authorities, and that's what I tell you, I have issue with.
Well, I have that.
But we see it here, we see it in building, we see it all across the state.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because I have a real fear. I know everybody says this over and over again, that it's over 50. Well, actually, maybe even over, but you see more control every year. It's not a one-time thing. It's a creeping evil disease that's happening where, and no offense to you guys or doctor, and I'm sure he's going to be great. He's just going to be great. It's just that I worry about the amount of power that he might have and he might use, but I'm sure he would use it wisely. But his successor might not, and he would be under the same thing. I don't like the state having that control. Thank you.
Flo,
I don't either.
Flo, could I just ask, Dr. Krager, would you like to give us any input on any of these questions? You don't have to.
Before you do that, let me say, I've seen Dr. Krager in action, and he is not inclined to be the tyrant that this document
No, I agree.
permits him to be.
I agree, but I think
Yeah.
he might want to say that or
I'm happy
share
to,
that.
I'm happy to say that. So yeah, this is Dr. Steve Kreger. Two things I would say is just regarding kind of the statewide powers. I mean, I view my role, if I'm appointed as the, maybe not permanent, but not the interim health officer, to advocate for Cowlitz County. So while, yes, we do have to follow, state law. I want to have like a finger on the pulse of the community and advocate for what's best. I think second of all, in regards to just, whether I would kind of overstep powers and duties, ultimately I report to this board. So if I do something that the board disagrees with, you can fire me. So I think that is a check on that. The health officer power is quite broad, but there's a check on that power.
I'm just
And
gonna,
I also, I remember in the midst of the previous difficulties, there was discretion that you exercised kind of, you weren't coming down with a heavy hand. It was the state officials that came in and interfered with our lives, and incorrectly, in my opinion, and we advocated as best we can. So I appreciated your sensitivity to us. It had a lot of bad stuff that happened, and we hope that doesn't happen again. And I think you're the right person to be able to be the intermediary as best we can.
Well, and I just want to, I know Bill wants to say something, but I wanted to just say I had an experience with you when the monkeypox came down and we were waiting for big headlines and shutdowns and pandemic kinds of attitudes. And I went in and talked with Dr. Krager and he said, no, there isn't any need to do that. Can I use your word? I mean, I can't quote you, but he said, I don't see that as being a problem. It doesn't seem to appear to be an issue, and we're going to just kind of watch it and see what it does. And he had a reasonable response, and I felt real comfortable with the way he responded. So that's how my experience has been.
and I just add that it took me a minute to find it. But the RCW, the first sentence of the local health officer powers and duties says that the local health officer acts under the direction of the local board of health. So there's a check and a balance there.
Yes.
Did you have something about just this resolution? Because I'd like to move on with the resolution, then we'll open it up. But if it's regarding the health officer position?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
No, I'm going to wait, but I
Oh,
was fed
okay.
up.
Okay,
I'm
that's
gonna
fine.
wait.
So, if there's any further discussion on this resolution? So the motion on the floor is to approve this resolution to appoint Dr. Krager as our local health officer. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Looks like no. So that's a unanimous. And thank you very much, Dr. Krager. Thank you also for your
you.
help during the interim period. It was very appreciated.
Of course.
So that goes on to the Board of Commissioners to work out the contract. Next item is. No, that's okay. We're gonna talk a little bit about the budget. So, the budget has already been approved for this year. I believe we'll have to go through a budget approval process again later this year, at the end of this year. And I just open the floor to board members if you have any comments on the budget.
Was it 1 year, Gene, or we do a 2-year budget cycle?
2.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
my mistake. It's then it'll be good. Got an extra year to hash it out.
I think most, if not all, your budget comes from state funding. Is that correct?
Primarily state, a tiny bit of federal, and then our fees and permit fees and et cetera.
Come through the county.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we're approving is any change in the fees and permits. The rest of it's kind of, I mean, we can adjust how many people we want, but the funding actually comes from the state.
We get it's sort of a set base funding to help fund our, some of our obligations like communicable disease activity, work, stuff like that. And then our permits and things help fund the environmental health type work as well. In addition, I know we've talked briefly about this before. We've received in the last few years the foundational public health funding that we've not really, we get it and then we give a large portion of it back is what happened last year. So that's a pot of money that we could have further discussion on if there's priority areas that the board is interested in doing additional work in locally. We could look at that and we may be able to utilize some of that funding for some additional work.
Okay.
Do you get that annually? The
Yes.
foundational? Okay.
Yes.
I would be interested in talking more about how we could use those funds for the county. I'm familiar with those funds, having received them through the tribe as well, and they've been really useful for building some of our foundational public health services. And I know that they're very flexible and in my head, there's a use for them for a community health assessment, but I think there's a lot of ways to go. So we could definitely, that would be a conversation I'd love to have with the board and with the department to see how we could utilize those instead of it going back and being given out to other counties instead of our own.
How much do those funds generally, how much is offered to the county?
Carol's better with the numbers.
Good morning, Carol Harrison, Director of Health and Human Services. Our foundational public health services, I believe this year, it's 1.4 million for the year.
And that's for 2024, I'm sorry.
It would be July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. And at this point, I think we are only set to spend about less than 300,000 of that. So it leaves about 1.1 million still available if we had special projects or doing community health improvement projects or community health assessment work.
Are there priorities the department has identified for those funds that would be useful, or are you wanting the Board of Health to provide that guidance, I guess?
Good question.
I think it would be great to come up with those priorities together. We have some ideas in terms of, we'd love to do a little bit more around chronic disease prevention and some things like that, prevention with youth and some things like that. But it would be great to have some of those discussions with the board and see if there are certain priority areas that we could focus on and strategies that we could agree on to move forward with.
So do you have until the end of June to to request those funds, that 1.1, or is that money that's sitting in your checking account?
It's literally sitting in our checking account. We invest it heavily, so we get a profit off of it, so to speak. We do get interest earnings, and so there's about $1 million sitting in there just from that. We do write a check, literally, in July or August, and it goes back what we don't spend. So then we uninvest it and return it back to the state.
What about the notion of having staff put together, because you said that you guys have some ideas, your priorities, presenting them to us at the next meeting, and then this board do the same thing and see where they perhaps might line up and attach some dollars? Because if you're talking about, a community assessment, what is that, something like that cost? And what was the other thing you mentioned? Chronic disease
prevention.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. I think Alyssa's question is a very good question. My answer to that would be slightly different. I think while I really like teamwork, and I think we are all assumed to be rational and we ought to be able to work together and come up with something, but essentially it's the Board of Health's decision as to what things we go after.
I think one of the priorities that we talked about last year, but we never quite got into it, would be youth prevention, youth abuse prevention. That I'm talking about vaping, alcohol, drug prevention. Today, we were supposed to have a speaker come talk about that a little bit, but I have some ideas on the youth prevention that we can do to go into schools. From what I understand is there's only one assembly per year in our county that only invites 200 kids from all the schools, and that's a one-time deal per year. Lindy attended that and spoke about it, I think, a couple months ago. They're doing it, seems to be doing a good job, but I don't know if that's enough. So I think one of the priorities would be, since drugs and alcohol, the drug court, there's all kinds of different things have been discussed, should be focused on the youth and trying to prevent them.
But Mr. Chairman, if I could push you up, I think Alyssa wanted to comment specifically about kind of the process, not the specific of that. So you were.
I'm just offering that as, that could be one of the priorities.
I know, but there is also peace.
Yeah.
So is it correct that the Board of Health is really the one that should give HHS its sort of marching orders that might be optional beyond what the RCW requires?
I think I would agree with that. And then I would just ask for their input, what they are seeing as well.
Of
And then
course.
maybe we can come up with a list.
But what I'm trying to do is avoid to have unelected group decide how they're going to go about things. And we are essentially the elected group.
Yeah.
I agree. I'd say that, yeah, to get some input from them, and we have talked a few times about different priorities, but to come up with a list, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think Mary Jane had the right idea, personally.
I guess I would like to know from the department in terms of actually implementing these priorities, since we do have a deadline for spending the money and getting it used in a way that's wise. What timeline we're looking at for getting you those priorities and having you have the capacity to take those priorities and turn them into actual actions, because although we can come up with generalities, we're not the ones that are going to do the actual work of getting that money spent and done. So, and yes, if it's our priorities, I'm fine with that, with input from the department, because you guys are the ones with boots on the ground, and I'd like to hear where you're seeing issues as well.
So it seems to me that now that we have a health officer, we need to coordinate through him what his recommendations are it's not like he's brand new to the county. He's been working the issues for quite some time. Perhaps we might want to use the next 4 or 5 months to prepare for next year based on his recommendations, based on how we get the data, make sure it's data driven rather than headline driven. And, you know, we've got some time if we just say, this year's already set, but next year we can make a difference because we do have budget amendments for the second year of the biennium. So I don't want to leave the health officer out.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Take advantage of his expertise.
But it would be a shame to return money to the state that the county could use if we could come up with a priority to use it for within a reasonable time without feeling rushed or crazy or leaving the health officer out. But I mean, what a shame to have 1.4 million that we could use to improve the health of our constituents, which we're all interested in, and return it to be used by other counties or the state itself.
The only argument I have with that is too often we say spend the money and we assume that we'll get good results out of it. And we really should think about proving everything that we claim. So if we're going to spend, I agree with you, let's not send 1.4 out if we know that we can do something very useful with it here. And the knowing is the very tough part. And the reason I say that is we all are very familiar with all the hazards of all kinds of things like STDs, and yet we still have it. Fentanyl overdoses, we still have them. We haven't cracked how to spend that 1.4 to bring those numbers down, maybe
Karen,
except through advertisement.
the money has to be spent by the end of June. And I guess that kind of following up with Alyssa and Dennis, is there anything in the queue that is that you guys and the health officer believe would be helpful to support the county's health that is fairly ready to go? And I mean, I don't know what your workload and what your visions are.
We can certainly look at timelines as we work with the health officer and maybe identify some of our priorities. We can look at what we may be able to do realistically to try to spend some of that before the end of the year. It would be, one time supporting a project here, little types of things, but we could certainly consider that timeline and be able to identify what we could do before the end of the year versus what might be longer term strategies.
And then I guess, I'm sorry. I guess but it makes sense to continue to move forward with you guys and the health officer looking at your priorities for the next fiscal year's funding to get those queued up and priced out, I guess.
And there's nothing to, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing to say we couldn't start a project that seems like a priority and a good, wise use of funds now with some of these funds, like you said, knowing that we're getting additional foundational public health dollars in the next fiscal year. Therefore, we could continue that work. So it doesn't necessarily have to be work that starts at that fiscal year period. We could take our time, identify priorities, knowing that we have the funds now and the funds in the future, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
May repeat, I'm a little nervous about this. I think Commissioner Weber actually hit the proper suggestion. Is mostly what's done now, dice has been cast. Let's use the time profitably in the future. I am finding that in many instances, if there are funds available, all of a sudden we've got to find a problem. Look, problems find us without us having to go find the problems. So let's not step too fast there.
I don't think it's about stepping fast. If we know this money's here and it's coming in the future, I don't know why we have to align our discussion of these priorities with the budget cycle if those funds are there and we know that they're coming and they're unobligated and unspent, I guess. I'm confused about why we can't just continue this conversation until we've identified how to use those funds in a good way.
Oh, always we should do exactly continue, but but to say that we must come to a decision by June that will consume the 1.4 is the emphasis I'm trying to
Okay.
take
No,
away.
I agree. I don't think we should be like, let's just spend the money, but I think because we know that money's there and we can even start to spend part of it, knowing that it's going to continue on, it would be a good discussion because we all know there's priorities that could use this funding. And I think that would be a very good use of this board's time to discuss what that means, and what that looks like.
So when we talk about making data-driven decisions, there's two aspects to that. That is the data that explains what are the health concerns and health problems, the challenges facing people in their everyday lives. But the other bit of the data that's much more difficult to get our heads around is the proper process for getting those problems managed. We're not going to eliminate a lot of those things, but we can manage. There's a lot of, I always hear evidence-based procedures or programs. And we need to make sure that we figure out programs that work, not because they see X number of people. That's not a success measure in my book, but something that actually changes behaviors in the long run. Again, very difficult to change. I mean, there's a reason why we still have a problem with alcoholism. It's extremely difficult to get that under good management, but we need to be aware of that. Not only what does the data say are our most serious health issues, and what does the data say are the programs that actually work, and make sure it fits Cowlitz County. So daunting task, really.
Mr. Martin?
I'd like to add, we've sort of is just a general picture. When we look at the money that we are reluctant to send back, realize that we are individually in this nation in just a national debt, $100,000 in the hole. And it's growing at 3% a year. So the typical family of four means that they owe $400,000. This money that we're using to solve problems that we're trying to find it doesn't exist except in the slavery of the future generation, if you will. So we ought to think about this as not only is there a would-be nice problem, but is it a problem that we can solve and should be solved? Otherwise, we're just a part of the community that says free money and let's go headlong into the cliff.
I think maybe we should, a good solution could be to have a workshop meeting about possible uses. And then I would also like to say that now that we have Alyssa as the new tribal representative on our board, I'd like to know what the tribes are in need of. And I'd like to see if we could meet with the tribal leaders, the elders of the tribe. Is that something you can arrange? Because they are part of Cowlitz County. And I think that the tribe has not been mentioned yet. And I think that we should talk with them as well.
I can certainly reach out to tribal leadership and see how they would like to engage with the board and the county on these issues. I can't guarantee a certain format or a certain audience for that, but I can reach out to tribal leadership and see
I think
what their priorities around public.
I think it would be important to have them come to one of our meetings possibly.
From my understanding, the tribe already has a pretty well-developed series of clinics, but it's statewide. It's not necessarily located here, but they have, through the federal funding, I think they get quite a bit of money to do both behavioral health as well as
well,
physical.
maybe we can learn something from the tribes too.
And what is the point of you being on the board if you don't feel there's a connection between Cowlitz County? Or I'm not saying there isn't one, but.
No, I'm not saying that. No, I
Oh.
think that's why I am on here. And I'm saying I'd
Good,
be happy to
good.
reach out to tribal leadership to
Yeah.
see what, like, I'm a representative. I don't speak, without,
No.
consulting with tribal leadership, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying what their public health priorities are.
Yeah.
But that is why I'm here, because I think there is a connection between county public health and tribal public health. And yes, we do have a number of, Cowlitz Tribe has a Health and Human Services Department that has, you know, a number of services, both within kind of direct medical care, behavioral health care, substance use disorder, as well as more like public health focused initiatives. And our services do run from down in Vancouver up to Tukwila. And obviously we have tribal members throughout Southwest Washington and the country. So yeah, I'd be happy to see for Cowlitz County specifically what some of those health priorities are. And I was just saying, I can't guarantee like who would be involved with that discussion and stuff, but I can happy to be the representative that I'm here to be and talk to the tribe about that.
Great.
Yeah, I think that having them come talk to us and learning, maybe they could teach us something, maybe we could understand their needs better. And I think that's better for the whole county.
I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have a Health and Human Services Department here that faces all kinds of problems, health issues in the community every day, and a health officer who does the same thing. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that our local expertise is important. The tribe makes sense to see how they're managing their projects, but you guys are the folks that are on the street every day, you know, working with the public to see what's going on.
So I'm going to ask the clerk to share a meme. You did receive it? Yeah, and the point is, I think Commissioner Weber's made good suggestions, Alyssa's made a good suggestion. We should continue working along, but we have to remember something that Groucho Marx was able to do, and it's right up there on the screen. Unfortunately, we're involved in politics, and we've got all these grandiose ideas, but please let us use this board effectively, not politically play games and grab free money.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that up, because Groucho Marx came to my mind. And just for the people who can't see it, politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. So it doesn't scare me personally if there's money there that has not been used.
Right. We have to answer questions like, we are reported to have good health or bad health, depending on whose article you read. But we spend more on health than any other nation in the world, as best as I can tell. And yet we're told our results are dismal, our quality of life is dismal, and so forth. I don't want to do something that exacerbates the problem.
So I'd like to, we'll table this discussion or continue this discussion, possibly in a workshop type of meeting. And if there's no objection, I'd like to open up to public comments. They've been waiting patiently. And thank you, Carol and Gina, for your input. And thank you, Dr. Krager, again. So we'll now open it up for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief. Just want to do some comments. I wasn't able to make it last.
Pull your
month.
microphone.
Is it right? Sorry, I have a habit of
There we
doing
go.
that. And so I just want to show, here is my plaque for service to the Board of Nursing in Oregon. So I actually was a care provider at one time. And here are some books. This is by Judy Mikovits. She was persecuted for coming out as a whistleblower years ago about how badly the AIDS crisis was handled. She was a research scientist who developed a lot of treatments and study on that subject, as well as on others. She's very well thought of in a lot of circles. Here is a book by Dr. Charles Atlas, who talks about the mistakes that were made during the Trump White House. Not that Trump did them, that there was a lot of politicization of the COVID response that he tried to circumvent with common sense and was stalled by Dr. Birx and Fauci. Thank you. And this book is by Robert Kennedy Jr. It has 2,000 plus annotations, very carefully researched and very carefully documented. And the media tries to portray him as a nutcase. He's actually a brilliant lawyer and worthy of consideration. And this book is by a gentleman who worked for BlackRock as a trends analysis. In order to do that, you have to have a really high IQ and very good pattern recognition. He was tasked by them with finding out what was happening in markets and making the right response with investments. He ended up looking at excess deaths in 21, 22, and 23 and saying there were no excess deaths in 20 and 19, making that this was not the pandemic they were making it out to be. And he was able to correlate this to the vaccine rollout. It's a very important book, and it's not by a lightweight. And I'm going to read my comments. I had heard that some of you had asked what my credentials were, and I will say the credential class has been proven to be wrong more than right, censorious and vindictive and downright fraudulent. The last people I want to hear from anymore are experts. I'm not presenting myself as an expert. I am presenting myself as a citizen who doesn't want your fear or authoritarian impulses to inhibit or restrict my freedom of choice medically. If you still trust the experts, after 3 years of lies and fear mongering, go ahead, but I'm done. And what is my background? I've had over 500 hours of undergrad study and a bit of upper division. I'm an autodidact, which is a fancy way of saying I learn easy. I have over 4 years of chem, 3 years of human phys and anatomy, 1 year of biology, 3 years of psych in upper division math and statistics, as well as innumerable hours in the humanities. I have worked in healthcare settings for over 35 years, 32 with one employer. I have no credentials to caregive anymore. I'm retired. View me as a 7th grader presenting a book report, or none of the data is mine. It has been gleaned from my research of medical papers, news reports, legal proceedings, and publications, and it stands on its own merits. Key takeaways from what I put on the record earlier. Fauci admitted masks don't work. He admitted the 6-foot distance was fabricated and that the vax did not do what was promised. Francis Collins, former of the NIH, admitted the lockdowns were a disaster. He was Fauci's boss. Dr. Deborah Birx, that was the scarf lady during the Trump administration, admitted she lied to President Trump to get her way. She misrepresented the risks to induce stricter measures which were destructive and futile. The inventor of the mRNA technology has warned it is harmful. Dr. Malone has come out fervently against the vaccine and himself was vaccine injured. John Hopkins' study revealed the lockdowns were harmful and not effective whatsoever. The Cochrane Medical Review Group and Brown University both concluded that masking was ineffective and harmful, especially to children. They found microplastics in people's lungs and also developmental delay on kids.
What did you say they found in children's lungs? Could you use your microphone?
In everybody's lungs.
Bring it down
They
right.
found microplastics in lungs from having the mask on all the time and developmental delay in children. Serious
Microplastics.
developmental delay.
Okay.
The inventor of the PCR test warned it is not a diagnostic tool. Medical research studies show that 5% of doses were deadly, signaling a needed halt. Japan refused to distribute the vaccines when impurities were found. The virus looks like it did come from a lab after all, and they knew it immediately, but lied to you. The FDA admitted they exceeded authority when they forbade and ridiculed ivermectin, which has now been shown to have a low risk profile and very good results. What more do you need to realize that freedom of choice is necessary and proper? Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bill.
Thank you for your comments.
Does the board want a copy of the bibliography?
Sure.
Yeah. I would,
Yeah, let's put that in the can we put it in the record? Or, did we?
there's also a movie, The Real Anthony Fauci has also been made into a documentary movie that was,
And it's right.
please.
One of the biggest problems with government programs, and I'm quoting somebody and I can't remember where I read this, is judging a program based on its intentions rather than its results. And so, with that comment, I want to tell you that in high school, some of the programs that I remember as going through high school, some of the assemblies that came through were extremely impressive. I remember them to this day. I can't believe that, maybe I naively believe there's some type of a national assembly organization for high school age kids or middle-aged kids that you could probably access with the snap of your fingers by just making the right phone call. And with the drug problem, in the top of my mind, the worst thing that we're facing today is drugs and addiction problems, alcohol, tobacco, et cetera. I can't believe that you can't get your hands on a program or two that you could get between now and the end of this school year, since the money's going to go away just about the same time the school year ends, that you're going to lose it. I would think that you could get a program into the high schools on a county-wide basis. How many high schools are in the damn county? I don't know, 6? I don't know off the top of my head, but I got to believe that somewhere, even on a short-term notice, you could get some very good programs in front of kids before they get out of high school and emphasize to them the dangers that they face in life, not only with addiction to tobacco and alcohol, but with the drug problem we have in this country right now, with the illegal drugs coming in and the fentanyl deaths that we're facing, which are just astronomically unbelievable to me. But I see the numbers in the hundreds a day that are dying. These are our future generations of this country. And I would tell you, one program I remember seeing that had not only a wonderful speaker, but had some very vivid images that at the time, you had almost thought they were taboo to show those types of pictures and images on the screen, especially to high school kids. But today, I would tell you, I would show a complete autopsy of a teenager on video to high school kids. After this kid died of a drug overdose, this is what he's going to go through. This is what they do to his body to figure out what the problem was. Do you want to be that kid? And I'd put that in front of them in very vivid color, full screen blow up, and say, you know, I'd explain to them ahead of time, if this type of stuff bothers you, you might want to cover your eyes, just like they do with movies, sex, violence, drugs, They put a warning out there, whatever it is, but get it in front of kids and make it as vividly real as possible to get the message across, scare the hell out of them, and get them to understand what the risks are. Do you want to be this kid? That's all I gotta say.
Actually, I like that. If that is something that can be done, a good professional job will have an impact, I'm sure, but
Ron, I've been personally trying to talk to different groups about exactly that, because I feel the same way you do, that it made an impact on me on the different assemblies, Mad Mothers for Mad Drunken Driving, whatever. It made an impact. There's some resistance. I'm not sure why, but I don't know if it's the schools that don't want to take the time for assemblies, but I approached someone in the area about this, and it was an administrator at a school, and he said, nah, we don't have time, or we just aren't, we have too much to do. And I got a real negative response. And so I went to the care coalitions who are going to come and talk to us. And I would like us to maybe have the public say something to them, because I've talked to them a little bit about it. Care coalitions are going to explain what they are, but they're through the ESD, and they're for prevention, youth prevention issues, programs in the schools. Every school has one. And the thing is, they would be a key player if we could get them to participate with us. And I don't know if we can, but they have money, and I think Cowlitz County I was going to ask Cowlitz County about, they have a little pot of money I heard one day that was up here that wasn't being used, and I didn't know if that was accessible.
You're looking at me, I have it stored
Well,
away
I
somewhere.
don't, well, anyway, I agree with you, Steve. I think we need those assemblies, but there's some resistance and I haven't quite figured out what it is and why. And so I think that might be something that we need to explore. Mary Jane, do you have any thoughts on that? You get into the community quite a bit.
So I think that everybody, my sense is that it's a little bit unstructured and unorganized. Everybody's building their own hierarchy without collaborating very well together. So there's a lot of people falling over each other to try to do something like that.
Do you know any groups that are thinking about assemblies for that kind of thing?
For assemblies, Link, I don't know that they do assemblies, Youth and Family Link, but they're very connected to the community and they work with the schools.
You're
And I
right.
believe countywide.
Can I just say something real quick when we're talking about intention versus results? I think there was also a comment in the public chat that kind of reflects my understanding of the issue, which is that a lot of these scare tactics have actually shown that they're not really effective for the majority of folks, that there are other tactics that have proven more effective for drug abuse prevention. So I'm all on board for youth drug abuse prevention, don't get me wrong, but I want to make sure that what we're doing, as we've all discussed here, is an effective way to approach that. And so I think scare tactics in public health, my understanding, which is very basic, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, is that scare tactics work really well for very short-term behavior change, but for long-term doesn't always work unless there is some type of other social supports and things in place. And so I would like to delve more into that to make sure that whatever we do choose to use that money for drug abuse prevention is effective and works for our community.
Well, I think there's been a lot of classroom drug prevention programs from what I hear from students that currently are in them. And they don't seem very impressed or affected by it is the problem, is what I've been told by a freshman, a couple different students, that they just don't take it very seriously the way it's being presented, although it's very professionally done and well done, and I'm sure it's data driven, but it doesn't seem to, we still have a huge problem. So I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I'm going to say that if scare tactics don't work, let's say that out of 100 people, 60 of them don't remember it day after tomorrow. But if 40 of them do, if 4 out of 10 kids, scare tactics last the rest of their life, was it worth doing? I think, hell yes, it was worth doing.
Nothing seems to.
And if I had a school administrator tell me we don't have time for that, I think I'd rip right into him and say, well, gee, great. How many people are you graduating from your school that can't do reading, writing, and arithmetic? You're not, don't have time to teach them the things they need to know. And now you don't need to trying to teach them to help them save their own life or maybe the life of a friend. Because sometimes that 1 out of 10 kids or 4 out of 10 kids, whatever that number is, that scare tactic works for, they'll be in the right place at the right time to save a friend's life or maybe a whole group of people's lives.
Well,
I
and the
happen to
answer,
be that kid one time.
and the answer to a lot of it is give them Narcan. That's been the go-to now, is just get your Narcan and everybody can die, overdose, and we can fix it. In the schools even, we're requiring Narcan. So I see this as a real public issue that we really need to push a little harder and look at the data, maybe some of the assemblies that they have around the country, and they could give us some information. I don't know where we would access that.
Yeah, I don't think Alyssa disagrees with you. She's saying.
No, I
It's okay.
No,
because-
I don't feel disagreement, but I just feel that we've sat on this a long time and we're seeing no improvement as far as I can tell, as far as the drug problem. If anything, it's getting worse. And unless someone can show me some information that says differently.
What
I
a
just haven't
sad
read any.
situation where we're talking about, oh, by the way, let's have every kid put a Narcan in his backpack to
That's
try
gonna
and
be
save
what
a life
happens.
after they've overdosed,
Yeah.
rather than stop the
Prevent it.
overdose to begin with.
You can only do that so many times.
Yeah. And you read stories about people that they get Narcaned and they get revived and go right back into an overdose and get Narcaned again. Then they survive the second one and they no more than survive that, get back on the street, and they're right back to doing the drugs again. And a repetitive process is just unbelievable to me. But when I read the information about how often that exists, what kind of a problem have we got civilization into? our civilization. Okay.
An old adage was an ounce of prevention is equal to a pound of cure. And I do think that we need to focus on prevention.
Well,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for your
piece of the
comment.
problem in here is that the public generally doesn't trust the government, because we have shown that we will say anything to get whatever it is we want. So why should I believe you?
Why should we believe the classroom teachers? I'd rather do an assembly and have passion and not just a curriculum.
Please go ahead.
Well, I gotta tell you, boy, all this talk just takes me down memory lane. They had a heck of a gosh darn drug program when I was in school, and I wish I could go back and watch a couple of those movies. I remember going into driver's ed, and we got to watch the movie Signal 32, where they actually showed the kids, got in a wreck, all drunk, dead, and it was like, couldn't wait to see it. Get to see dead people today, and nobody covered their eyes. I remember this one movie. I'm digressing a little bit. I didn't mean to talk about this part of it, but boy, this one movie I watched in 6th grade, I can still remember it. Boy, that was a great movie, and kind of made me feel like doing it, to be honest with you. So, your compassion is really, really noted here, but I wanted to go back to the money part and the fact that, we have $1 million and we got to spend it, kind of thing. And, this is something that I have experienced and seen through the government. This idea that, well, we have this money, we have to spend it. And the fact is that what about if we acted like grown-ups, we funded our own stuff, and we didn't spend other people's money for all our high-flying ideas? I gotta be honest with you, and there's no slight on anybody here, but I have exactly zero confidence that you will solve any social issue, not just this one, but any social issue, with a board of government. It's just the wrong place for this kind of stuff to be going on. And so that's my opinion on that one.
Thank you. We have a hand up that's been up for a bit. Who is that? Tom? Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. On May 18th, 2020, when all of humanity was desperate for COVID-19 treatment options, former President Trump proudly declared he had been taking the anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine as a preventative measure, even though the Food and Drug Administration had already warned the drug could cause serious heart problems if used off-label on coronavirus patients. But as the former president was known to do, he ignored the FDA warning and said to the entire world, quote, "All I can tell you is so far I seem to be okay. I get a lot of tremendously positive news on the hydroxy. What do you have to lose?" End quote. And my apologies for the poor impression. Well, folks, we now know over 17,000 people died from taking hydroxychloroquine in the United States and 5 other countries that were part of a recent study of the drug's use during the pandemic. Donald Trump is literally responsible for killing thousands of Americans with his absurd rhetoric and devastating lies. It is simply gobsmacking how this board's leader and majority continue to not only ignore how wrong the former president and his acolytes were during the pandemic, but continue to endeavor gaslighting the public and rewriting history in a pathetic effort to absolve their enormous culpability and guilt. Enough with the endless stream of conspiracy theories and medical misinformation from charlatans like Bill Youngren, who just polluted the room with his absurdities. Respirators do work. Vaccines do save lives. And Dr. Anthony Fauci is a veritable hero to humanity. I have no doubt Commissioner Mortensen and his lackeys will continue their absurd crusade to gaslight the world. but they will never erase the fact Cowlitz County was the worst in the state for COVID deaths. For them to continue displaying not a shred of contrition or reverence over this terrible amount of loss is deeply immoral. Stop politicizing public health. Thank you very much. Be well, everyone.
I need to respond to that. Okay, that study he's referring to was a bogus study that was pulled, and it was condemned for being absolutely set up. Hydroxychloroquine has one of the best safety profiles of any drug. It's used routinely around the world for malaria. It has been used off-label for other things like lupus and you name it. It's not a dangerous drug. That is an absurd accusation. And when you have Fauci actually telling you they made mistakes, you've got Francis Collins telling you made mistakes. That's not conspiracy theory. That's them being contrite, not me. And they're the ones that politicized it, not the other. Thank you. My God. That's still enough.
I know I had read somewhere, and I believe it's the country of India takes it on a weekly basis. They have a nickname for it. They take it every Sunday. So I'm not
Well, I
sure.
just, for information, because of a medical condition I have, I've been subscribed and I've been taking hydroxychloroquine for years. And a considerable dose of it every day. And it's a prescribed medication. A certain side effect is a great benefit to me. And Mr. Samuel's comments are completely absurd that hydroxychloroquine has ever killed anybody that I know of. It has great side effects, and I'm personally somebody who benefits from it immensely.
Thank you for waiting. Sorry.
You bet. My name's Steve Rader, and this is actually the reason that I'm here this morning, unknowingly. I have been involved with youth for probably 25 years now. I've been a coach in Coaman and Kelso in wrestling and football and in baseball. I'm actively involved with youth in my church. We developed a program where we put youth through a challenge course at church for a week. And over the summer, and I've been doing that for 12 years now. I have put several thousands of youth through that program. And what we're talking about right now with regards to these kids, we're looking at addressing the symptom, and the problem truly is that these kids have there's an identity crisis going on. They do not know who they are. And what we do is I've been doing it for free. I do it for my church, and I did it on my spare time. I started a nonprofit organization for kids, Raiders Leadership and Outdoor Adventures. Because what I have found is that as we put these kids through these challenging obstacles and we make them do hard things and they go into a place mentally where they've never had to go because they're not challenged at school any longer. They're no longer, if their parents don't have the resources to put them into baseball or to put them into football or to participate in extracurricular activities, and they don't have a coach that challenges them to do more and to do better, then they go to the next place. And that is all these shiny little objects that society has created. And these kids go to the place that they feel welcome, to somebody who's going to make them feel a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And I've seen it over and over and over. With my church organization, I've been responsible for transient people within Cowlitz County. I'm the one that helps them whenever there's an issue. And in my conversations with them, 90% of the time I ask the question, how did you end up getting to where you're at right now? The response is, it was a series of bad decisions when I was in a dark place in my life. They don't know how to handle the stresses that life throws at them. And we're not preparing them for that in schools. So I got tired of seeing it over and over and over, and we're not addressing the real problem. The problem is these children need something that builds their hope, that gives them, you know what, I just went through a pretty challenging thing, and I did that. I accomplished something. Their self-value and their self-perception, if you go talk to youth today, their perception of themselves is based on their phone. How many likes can I get? How many people liked what I posted? That's fickle. That's not real. And the program that I have developed for these kids, and I would encourage all of you guys to meet with any of the kids that have been through that program. What I get from them is, this is my favorite part of the day. And I'm not easy on those kids. We make them do hard things. These challenges that we put them through are difficult things. But at the end of the day, they recognize I'm better than I thought I was. And then they have no interest in going to those people who offer them that quick fix. We really need to focus on helping our children deal with the stresses and the anxieties of life. That really is the bottom line, to help them do things that help them understand they can do hard things. It's okay, life's hard, and to prepare them for that and to not make it easy for them, because the drugs, the alcohol take away those stresses for a short period of time, and then it compounds the problem. And we keep talking about the drugs and the alcohol, and the reality is we need to help them gain an identity that they know who they are and that they can handle life and they can contribute positively. So I'm not asking for money. I have been self-funding that for 2 years now since I started that, but I am throwing it out there. I would like to have a conversation with any or all of you about that program and see what we can do to help push it forward to help the youth in our county.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'd like to give you my card.
Oh, but before you go, in the Q&A, people have asked enough, maybe you could just repeat your organization and how they may contact you.
Sure. It's Raiders Leadership and Outdoor Adventures. We have a website. We're on social media. They can call me directly. My cell number is 360-957-3780.
Repeat that more slowly.
360-957-3780. And just so you guys know, I have been going to the Kelso School District and the Klamath School District and the Woodland School District. I teach the seniors. I do symposiums at LCC for the Kelso School District, teaching kids personal finance. I'm a financial consultant by trade, but I've taken that on because I see that there's a massive need for our youth today.
Yeah.
Those are great comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you point out, and totally on board, I think you point out one of the struggles that we always have. We end up treating a lot of symptoms and we don't treat the core. And I see that in a lot of areas, and it's frustrating. So I'm glad you point that out. I think that's absolutely true. We see a symptom and want to fix the symptom. Well, a lot of times it's much deeper than that. And I applaud you for what you do.
I think it is a kind of combination of both too. I don't know if you could take away the drug education or those kind of things too, and just leave it to self-esteem. I mean, I think they kind of go, I think we need both, to be honest. But yours sounds great.
So I think we've run a little bit late, but I think we've had some good conversation here and a few possible action items. If anybody else on the board has any more comments? No? Without that, then I'd like to adjourn this meeting at 11:28. And thank you all for coming.
Take a short recess and then we'll start up the public meeting again.
Yeah. Thanks for backing me up on that.
transportation facilities. This includes roads, bridges, parking lots, sidewalks, and ramps people use to move around. So if you want to be part of that conversation, Tuesday, Cowlitz, March 5th, 2024, Cowlitz Expo Center, 6 to 8 p.m. You can go in person or you can do online. We'll put that out, what you do online, but that is available. Okay. Huh?
What day is that?
Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Expo Center. Next Tuesday. So you have an opportunity to have your input in that. Okay. Any other public comments for the day?
Is that it? We're done after that?
Yep.
All right, well, let me keep you guys here for a little longer.
Mr. Chairman, could you start the timer? I think half a minute's about right.
That's all right. But I'll say something and then you guys will have to talk about it a lot more. So, Board of Health is in here, you know, and this just brings into my mind, so who owns the building that they work out of? You know, the health building. I mean, is that a county property?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's county property.
So we own that. And then, we also, pay for all the operations, heat, water, all the utilities, that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
That's true.
And so they got $1 million sitting there, but we gotta get tasked with, paying for that door, $30,000, right? For their roll-up door at the front of the building.
We've been struggling with an overall facility plan since certainly before I came on board. And there's a lot of inertia, a lot of complexity. It's
There
one of
always
those
is.
things you just do because you know you have to, but
Well,
nobody
it makes
wants.
it easy to complain that way, Aaron. You know,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
You know, you got so many little things going out there. I can gripe about almost any one of them.
We did an extensive facilities study. I think it was before you
Before
joined
me,
us, so
yeah.
it's been a long time, no.
Yeah.
It was called the Ming study and analyzed all the buildings. Said basically the Hall of Justice has good bones. It's just
Who
some-
said that?
well, it has good bones. I mean, it is a solid building, but there are some design features that make it unworkable.
I'd like to meet the guy that said that.
But the main point I was trying to make is that their recommendation is that we need to spend at a minimum of $5 million a year on maintenance and upkeep.
Yeah.
And we hadn't been doing that hardly at all
Well,
because we go through a recession and our discretionary income begins to disappear.
Sure.
And it was that, I mean, that recession started in 2008. They cut off a lot of workers and they stopped doing maintenance. And that recession lasted until 2014.
Yeah.
And, you know, the buildings are falling apart. We don't spend $5 million a year, but what we did do is to monetize the landfill, and we're getting the money and the cash. And we've climbed back up with doing the things that should have been done a long time ago. The security part with entrances to that provide sanctuaries for homeless people, that continues to be a problem. That ends up being a design. And I was over at the museum yesterday. And to go in the back entrance, you have to step over drug paraphernalia that are left behind because it's kind of a little cove they can hide around. So we talked about needing to just build a new door and get rid of that location. Those things are ongoing. So that was the reason why there's a new pull down door, because they were sleeping in that entrance as well.
I know they were. You know, back in COVID days, we used to go protest over there and we'd show up before they opened and there'd always be a few homeless people in that doorway. And then they'd come out, chase them off. There's always a pile of garbage there. And so, you know, when you talk about that kind of money expenditures where, you know, we've got this problem over here, so we're going to do something like this, like the door, and it's because of the homeless people, you know, if we didn't have the homeless people, we wouldn't need the door, right? I mean, if law enforcement would go by there and say, hey, you can't sleep there, kick them out, that kind of thing. At any rate, we end up in these situations. But an interest, you touched on the Hall of Justice over there. And whether it has good bones or not, the design of that building is not right. And, we're aware of the problems there there's a lot of space in that building that's just not able to be utilized. And, I'm the whole upstairs being the jail. So it's like, really, honestly, you could tear that building down and put up something a quarter of the size to house the courtrooms, and the sheriffs could have their own department somewhere,
But Tim,
Uh,
therein is one of the challenges we face. You're wearing a T-shirt that says we can't do that
That's right.
because that's theft. So
That's
you have
right.
to spend an awful lot of money to replace a building that at a minimum gets us by okay. It's not the best design.
Yeah.
And it's got heating problems and the electrical service and the internet you're right. It was a bad design from the very beginning. Arn, you looked into that as well. What did you kind of come up with as a grand total if you replaced it functionally with a new building?
Yeah, what would that?
Well, there's a little story there. When I first came on board, I started, that became obvious. I look at the Meng report and there are lots of tendrils, but to make it clear, I used the numbers you just heard, and we could have moved all of us to the mall. And with the cost of the move and all that, I figured our return on investment, or I should say the time to amortize the additional expense and get ourselves with a good building, something to be happy with, would be on the order of 2 years. Whenever you can invest anything and get paid back in 2 years, it's like, and it's because we don't spend not even a small fraction of 5 million a year. The big issue expense, I think, is what you were looking for is we need a courthouse.
Yeah.
And the courthouse, let's see, the last one I think I saw was built up north, maybe Snohomish or somewhere around there for 220 million or something like that.
That sounds kind of high to me, but.
Well,
Yeah.
but you see, we don't just build something, we build palaces, but we don't maintain them. And
Well, sometimes they're not even palaces. Hall of Justice is not a palace.
right. Well,
Well, at the time,
Thought it was,
they
but at the
really
time, yeah.
treated it like a palace.
and
All it lacks is a spire.
and I think I mentioned, you might have not been at that meeting where in all this time, I've been trying to get the Superior Court to give us a specification of what they consider a good, what a courtroom should be like. And I have not been successful in getting that. They want to pay $80,000 at the time for a consultant. And I'm saying, you're the one that uses the courtroom. You're the one that complains about the courtroom. Why don't you tell me what your complaints are? Why don't you lay it out the way you think it is, and amongst yourselves, figure that out? Nothing. There's also there are courthouses all across the nation. Find the blueprints for the courthouse you like.
Well, maybe the planning commission should look into that one.
That'd
Anyway.
only be if we decide to build a courthouse in a single family neighborhood.
Yeah. So,
And
anyway.
then one very hidden thing is, if you can get somebody to build it for you, then you save a lot of money. There's a classic story of the firehouse in Cathlamet. Have you heard that story?
No.
So prior to that new firehouse, the fire chief from before, when he retired, he gave the city the land and $2 million to build themselves a firehouse.
Wow.
They refused it because they couldn't do it for the money. So he built the firehouse, He knew what a firehouse ought to be. He built it on the land he gave them, and then he gave it over to them. And all of that is because we got these stupid rules that are not unlike these stupid rules here.
Yeah.
And so you got to figure out how to avoid them. So we own these buildings here. If we were to have gone to the mall, we would have probably worked the contract out where the mall owners build us something on their property. And then we lease it back for 25 years or more, however it is. But they take care of a whole bunch of external maintenance and we do our internal maintenance.
Yeah, sure enough. That's the thing about it is, and that's what I'm saying about that building is there's just a lot of wasted space over there. And for what they have, which I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, 3 or 4 courtrooms? Is that what they have there? That's
Well, they're
6 courtrooms.
they're
I guess I haven't been in enough trouble. I haven't been to all of them yet.
they're not all alike. And they also, you can go there. I used to walk through there pretty frequently to understand the problem. Courtrooms are very often empty.
Yeah.
And that led to another discussion where they claim they have no choice because people, when they know they have a court date, all of a sudden they settle out of court. It's no different than the airlines. They have to overbook because people don't show up.
Yeah.
And they go broke otherwise. Well, they could do that here. And they say, well, look, you already have to accommodate the fact that you thought this was a 1-day trial and it ended up being 3 days. You already have the mechanisms to cope with all that.
Yeah.
So take advantage of them. They got history so they can do the statistics properly in a significant way. That's too much, but we have to still hire for them additional court administrators. And I'm like, I don't think they are interested in a solution.
No end to the fun. Right?
Now you got me into trouble.
Well, yeah, but you know, the day's coming, that building's got to go. And it will be money ahead when that day comes.
I thought we could sell the building to McMenamins.
Yeah.
And you could, and they would say refurbish it for a hotel. You could spend a night in jail at McMenamins in Longview.
You could, but you know, one of the problems, and this is just something that popped in my head the other day, you know, you really can't put people on that 3rd floor over there or the jail floor is because there's no escape. All the windows are made so you can't get out and there's just one in and out. They got a stairway and an elevator.
I got news for you. There are offices up there.
Well, they shouldn't be, right? I mean, that's a fire danger.
Well, that's true of every floor though.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying, you just, you know, somebody used this term the other day or some meeting ago's sometime, but you got to rip the Band-Aid off at some point, you know? And like we were just talking about taking money from the future generations, you know? The longer we sit on this problems, then that's the future generations that end up getting stuck with it. And
well, the
you know,
fundamental problem is there are iniquities all over the place. Government, people think government can solve iniquities.
Yeah.
They only tend to cause iniquities with good intention. So
it always starts with good intentions. Yeah. Always. Well, that's been fun day. Good to talk to you guys.
See you later. Ronald.
I have one thing for you under miscellaneous, and you can, looking for concurrence or give me some direction on it. I told you I was going to meet with juvenile George, because we had talked about a couple different things over there that we send our juveniles out of town for. One is when they're in drug rehabilitation or mental health. In the state of Washington, we have 4 facilities for drug use, none in Cowlitz County. So I think the nearest one is up in Seattle. We have 1 mental health deal, and I think it's over in Eastern Washington somewhere. We actually even at times will send kids to Utah. So we're trying to look at ways we could utilize that building. So, I think we can use it for one of those two purposes. And my next step with George was to, what we discussed is sitting down with a small team with him, probably Judge Hahn, because she kind of represents the judges now, and who we thought might be, because I don't want it to be a county-run facility. If we're doing drug rehab, I'd rather have private enterprise run that thing. They just use our building, and we have a lease or whatever we do with the building. So that's the next step I was going to take. And my question to you is, are you okay following that direction? Because eventually it needs to end up in a workshop with some kind of proposal, or do you want to be more involved with it? You want to run it through these meetings? I can certainly bring those in and run it through these meetings, or
Are you
how do you
leaning,
want to do that?
are you leaning toward mental health treatment or drug?
I
prevention?
asked George that question. I said, if you had, in a perfect world, if you could choose, which one would you choose? And he felt there was a bigger need in our county for the drug rehab.
So then you'd need, what's the right agency to do that?
That's the thing, is we need to identify who does that. Because the last thing I want to do is I want it to support itself. I don't want them every year that Cowlitz County runs a budget to support this thing. I don't want to do that. And I think we can,
Other than the per patient fee that we
Right.
might end up paying anyway, but.
yeah, in a perfect world, we would get our kids taken care of here locally instead of shipping them out. And it would be run by an entity that should cover itself and should be self-sustaining. That would be in my perfect, that's my end goal.
So the person locally who does both sides of the behavioral health thing is Mark Bollinger with Integrated Healthcare. And he's the clinic that the BHO uses.
Yeah.
And the BHO is both mental health and substance abuse. But they have an office in town, and they have contracts with Medicaid providers. So they use the Medicaid dollars. Well, most of those juvenile clients would be not 100%, but a lot of them are going to be qualified for that kind of funding source.
But, and I'd have no trouble, including those type of people in this conversation. I don't want to, as we talked about the health officer, I think the more, the better get perspective and find the right person, right fit. So I won't proceed on things if you guys are wanting to see it different or you don't like that direction. It needs to be a board decision, so everybody needs to be involved. Whether you're physically involved in every step, that's kind of up to you. More than happy to have that.
There's several implicit questions in what you're asking. The one, I think if you can come up with a straw man, I'd recommend that. Don't do it by committee. It'll take you way too long. Have something somebody can shoot at. It's a little bit like, would you go into a meeting and say, how long is a piece of string? Or would you go in and say, I think a piece of string ought to be 3 feet long? You get two different answers completely. And so go ahead and try and work something and then hit us as you see fit. The other thing is, I know what we do isn't very useful for a variety of reasons. We have not a good working system. So in that case, only a fool would say, let's not do anything about it. Then the next question is what we would do going in the same direction of an alien system, or is it a deviation of some kind? And I think you already know pretty much the details of what isn't working there. there's a synergism in life that says if you pay attention to details of being careful and responsible here, it sort of has this osmotic pressure on other things around you that clean it up also.
Yeah.
So, you just heard Steve Rader speak about a system, and at the risk of irritating myself and the two of you, we just gave someone another 2.5 million or another 2 million for something for which is just doing the same old stuff, when in fact, on a personal challenge with the individual in the past, I wanted something like that, because that's what helps people. Anyhow, so yeah, there's plenty of room for change there.
Yeah,
Go for it.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, be careful about getting bogged down in a committee. Yeah.
Well, I know, and
Might have
it
a
would not be
conversation.
a big group. It may just start with myself, George, and Judge Hahn is trying to figure out a direction.
I would suggest that you keep it there until you guys are all on the same
Yeah.
page enough to go forward.
And Arn, you know me long enough, I'm totally on board. I'm not looking at doing the same thing. It would
Right.
have to be something that proven results. If we're gonna help these kids, I need an end result that is positive, not just over
Yeah,
and over.
it could be world changing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If we do it right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're paying to have kids sent out now. And if we can do something within our county and maybe structure it in a way that we can actually see some results, then to me, it's a worthwhile path. Whether we get it completed, I don't know, but I think
Yeah.
it's a path to start.
You won't get anything done if you don't try. Uh, Dennis mentioned Mark Bollinger, and I think both he and Trinidad Medina actually have a pretty good head on their shoulders. So at some point when you need information, I think you can count on them to provide you a perspective. And that's not to say they should be on the committee. It should be one of the people you go ask.
Okay, I'll move forward.
There it is.
I just.
A little known program that the BH, that Great Rivers did was they took a shuttered hospital and turned it into a treatment facility, but it's run privately. But it was the BHO that got the funding to get it all back in working order.
Yeah.
So it's up near McCleary, and I don't even know if that's an issue now on the board meetings.
Doesn't really
It's run
come up.
very well, so.
Yeah.
You know it's run very well when you don't hear anything about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, moving forward. My goal is to never have you guys hear something that I'm working on and then question me about it. It should be,
Oh, no,
should be that you know.
I really appreciate how you're going about it. That's kind of how we were doing yesterday about the LT1. It's like I measure the appetite before asking them to do anything.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we will adjourn. Thank you.
One last comment. Did you know taxation is theft?
I read that somewhere. We will adjourn.
You say it, but I don't agree with it.
Yeah.